The Geology and Environmental Biology Dyad is also known by the Renaissance scholars as the Science Dyad. These two paired courses fulfill the natural sciences requirements in your curriculum. The lectures are held on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, while the labs and the field trips are on Saturday mornings.
I teach the environmental biology part of it. And we start off by talking about basics of environmental biology, and then we move into how people affect the environment, how the environment affects people. And it goes very nicely with the geology part of it, because obviously geology has a big effect on organisms as well as on people. And so we talk about how the biology affects the soil and the water and the land and the air, and then how that in turn affects people. So we look at how we are affecting the planet and how the planet is affecting us.
An introduction to geology is generally a course that spends a lot of time talking about minerals and rocks, but this one we do a little bit differently. Since the whole thing tends to have an environmental bent, I try to focus very quickly on topics in environmental geology that are very relevant to topics that a student might see in the news from day to day, and try to prepare them for that and get them kind of up to speed on some of the problems that we're facing in our present and in our future.
Science is done through experiments.
The steps you should do this in are first take the big jar right here and go in and just get a sample of water and take it and put it aside so that you don't get muddied up water. Then do the biology.
Professor McDaniel explains how the labs for environmental biology and geology are run.
I'd say most of the labs are actually divided, so they're either one or the other. And so about half of the labs, well, first of all, about a third of the labs are actually field trips. And of the remaining, about half of them are pretty strictly biology and the other half are pretty strictly geology. However, they do follow on class topics, so it's not as if they don't relate to the other, and so there's a little bit of overlap here and there, but still they're fairly separate, and we hold them in separate labs, for instance, the geology lab versus the biology lab. We do have a couple that are intertwined. For instance, at the end of the semester, we've been going out to the creek behind campus and applying what we've learned from both labs to looking at the creek a little bit more closely, and using techniques that we, for instance, doing water analyses, but also looking at some of the plant species that are growing back in the forest there.
The field trips are one of the highlights of the Science Dyad.
One of the field trips that we go to the coal plant out in Dickerson, and that one's really fun. It's interesting to go and see where most of our energy is actually made, because we get over in Montgomery County we get over half of our electricity from coal, and so it's interesting to go out and see the coal plant. We've got a great man, Doug, who always ends up leading those field trips. Who's very much a character, and he's always got something different to say whenever we go, so I'm always enjoying the trip. And we get to look around and see actually how electricity is made and where it comes from and how much coal is being used to actually turn on our light bulbs, and what kind of environmental protections are in place and all of that sort of thing. So that's one of them. Students also go to the waste incinerator plant, which is right next door, to see where we burn much of our waste and try to eke out a little bit of energy from that. And again, the environmental protections in place. It's always interesting to see just how there's this one room just full of garbage, which always impresses all of the students. It always impresses me just to see just how much garbage we make, how much trash. There are other field trips, one to a working organic farm,
where we did a little bit of volunteer work, and we surveyed their stream for them to figure out the health of their stream, what organisms are living in their stream, and is their stream healthy, which is important in a farm because farms can have very big impacts on water quality. So they're trying to make sure that they're not having a bad impact on their farm, and we were helping them with that.
Students who decide to take this paired course can expect individual and group assignments.
We've got 2 take-home assignments, one for each portion, and so one is geology and one is biology, in the sense that we are individually responsible for each of those, but I'm familiar with Dr. Sagasti's assignment, and of course I'm familiar with mine, and I know that both of them aren't strictly biology or geology, but they're more broad than that. But in any case, they're take-home assignments that the students go and in both cases look at some of their own habits and look at some of their own use of resources, for example. We also have a few group assignments that are done inside the classroom where students get together and try to solve different problems, and we try to mix those up throughout between different years. And so, for instance, this year we took a look at soil erosion in Haiti, and we did that one right after the big earthquake in Haiti because we thought that was kind of an interesting way to look at some of the other issues that Haiti's been facing. We also looked at water issues in Africa, and especially sub-Saharan Africa, and so that was one of the group topics. And we basically put them in the position of having to solve a problem and see what kind of creative ideas that they can come up with how to solve that.
Among the group projects is the assignment to design a sustainable city.
We put the students in a geologic setting, so we tell them about the mountains and the rivers and the valleys in certain places, as well as what kind of resources are available in terms of minerals and forests and fishes and all kinds of things. And then we tell them, if you were designing a city in this particular place, how would you do it? And they have to make sure that they get enough energy for their people. They have to make sure they have enough food for everybody. They have to make sure that their city has a source of income so that they can buy and sell things and use their resources, but wisely. We make sure that they have to take care of their biodiversity, so they get graded on that as well. They get graded on how they set up their city, whether it makes sense transportation-wise, whether people are going to have to use too much energy getting from place to place. And it kind of is a nice project because it puts everything in the semester together. So they have to think about water, about land, about energy, about how humans interact with nature, and about biodiversity all in one big project.
The students share more details about the Sustainable City assignment.
It was fun. I mean, in that neither of us were architects or engineers or economists in those ways, but we still came up with a city and, you know, just keeping it as sustainable and pollution-free as possible. And it was interesting, especially doing the research, to see some of the stuff that's out there already in helping to make cities better and more green. So that was fun. That was fun in that we got to learn new things like that, you know, like learning about geothermal energy and stuff that we hadn't even talked about in lectures. But because we had this assignment and got to do the research behind it, we learned a lot about new green technologies that aren't, you know, 20 years in the future. They're right now that we could be doing.
We weren't successful in being completely sustainable, particularly from the energy use perspective, but I think we learned a lot about sort of compromises that are required, and also, you know, the things that are not so difficult to do with if you make sustainability and protecting the environment a priority.
Students should expect to take 5 exams throughout the semester. As Professor Sagasti explains, there is no midterm, and the final is used as a makeup test.
So it's a comprehensive exam that asks about the entire semester. If a student is sick and misses an exam at some point in the semester, then they're going to take the final to make up for it. If a student flubs a test because for some reason they just didn't do well on that test, then the finals has a chance to make that up.
The Science Dyad can be taken by any student in the Renaissance Scholars Program.
Most of the students that take it are not science majors. We do get science majors in there, but most of the students are not science majors. And so people who aren't science majors are often very frightened of science. And so what we do is we're trying to make sure that we provide a science class that has all the rigor of a real science class, because we don't want to dumb it down, but at the same time make it accessible. And what we really, really want is for students to be able to get out there and see news items and see things that are coming up in politics and choices that they have to make when they go out and vote. And I want them to be able to put that into a context of science and understand what the meaning of that is. And so in the end, that's really my goal for students in the class.
Taking a paired course is not only a unique experience for the students, but also for the professors who are teaching the courses.
We've actually gone to a lot of trouble to think about this, and we've changed it as the semesters have gone on to where every semester we're trying to think how can we better interleave the two courses. We spend probably the first couple of weeks teaching separate courses because each of them requires a different foundation, so basic topics in biology and ecology and basic topics in geology where the two don't intermix. But very quickly afterwards we get into a few different sections, one on agriculture, and then we talk about oil, and then we talk about energy and climate issues. And for each of those we just identify which parts are geology based and which are biology based. And it's not always clear how you divide those up, but we usually find some way to do it. And then we'll kind of trade off to tell them the different aspects of each of those. So for instance, in agriculture, I'll explain how a soil is made and what a soil is made of. And then I'll talk about also soil erosion, which is essentially a geologic process. And she'll talk about farming techniques, and she'll talk about the biology of soils. And so we'll kind of come together in that way. In addition, when we do have topics that seem to fall more into her area or into my area, we find ourselves, we've called them little boxes, little points where we can kind of interject our own viewpoint into that person's topic, because the two do overlap an awful lot.
Having a partner in teaching is actually the most fun about this class. It's great to watch somebody else teach, first of all, because I always learn from watching somebody else teach. It's great to learn something new. I've learned a lot of geology and I find it fascinating. It's also wonderful to have somebody to bounce ideas off. What if we did this, or what if we did that? Sometimes we keep each other from making silly mistakes, and sometimes we get great ideas from each other. So overall, it is really fun to have a partner. It is a little bit more effort. There's a lot of coordination, that I'm doing this and then you're doing this, and especially when we get into lectures where we go back and forth. I teach a few minutes, she teaches a few minutes, I teach a few minutes, she teaches a few minutes, and that really gets to be a lot of coordinating to make sure we're not repeating each other, to make sure we're not leaving anything out, and to make sure we're really combining everything in a way that makes sense for the students.
Former students share their thoughts about the Science Dyad.
I liked best the application to everyday life beyond studies, so things having to do with your carbon footprint and how modern life contributes to environmental issues, and particularly how they applied it specifically to areas of Montgomery County and the Chesapeake Bay. So it wasn't just abstract concepts, it was real life, real world, concrete things that are happening in our community.
I really liked most that we were learning about real things that I could actually apply in my life, that it wasn't just science and science basics, that abstract, okay, this is how biology works and this is how chemistry works. It was a lot more of things that I'd actually need, like this is how pollution is caused and this is how we can work with it, and stuff that I can actually apply to my life, which was nice.